Bugünkü videoda sizlere sevgili gençler ve Türkiye'deki herkes adına taziyelerimizi sunmak için ve sevgili John'la beraber travma üzerine bir video çekmek istedik. Bizim için açıkçası çok zor bir zaman. Şu son 2 haftadır. Tam 2 hafta oldu çünkü depremi yaşayalı Türkiye'de, Kahramanmaraş'ta, Hatay'da ve diğer 10 ilde. O sebeple sizler için bugün bir video çekeceğiz. Emre Müftüoglu'nun Hatay'dan, İskenderun'dan yazdığı arkadaşınızın hatırı için ve ricası üzerine bu videoyu çekiyoruz. Böyle diyerek ben sözü sevgili John McNally'ye vermek istiyorum ki bize birazcık da psikoloji hakkında, travma psikolojisi hakkında bilgilendirsin diye. Videonun tamamını muhakkak izleyin lütfen. Altyazıyla paylaşacağız, Türkçe altyazıyla. Ben sadece girişi Türkçe yapmak istedim ki hangi konuda konuşacağımızı öğrenebilin diye. İyi seyirler diliyorum ve sözü John'a veriyorum.
Hello everyone. I'd just like to start by giving my personal condolences to the people of Turkey and Syria. I know this has been a devastating time for you. Those are affected directly and indirectly. It's very difficult to go through, and I just wanted to say personally that, I'm aware, and my condolences to all of you. Today I want to talk about the actual event, the earthquake, more from a critical incident point of view, and just what that means. So generally, we talk about, as opposed to psychopathology, which is more of an internal sort of longer-term thing, critical incidents are any event that overwhelms the both mental and physical safety of an individual and kind of floods the body with emotion. And it always happens on an event, so it's a critical incident, stress reaction. It's important to emphasize that I'll talk about the different symptoms that often come up and what you can do about that. It's important to emphasize that this is the body's normal reaction to an abnormal event, so that it's not you going crazy, it's really just you trying to adjust to something that is just extraordinary. Okay, so that's important to understand going in. In the earthquake itself, it'll affect the people differently. And essentially, there are two main groups. One are the people that are actually in the earthquake zone that have been directly affected. They're they've either survived it or they're critically wounded now, or they're wounded by what was going on and they're trying to survive. For those people, their world is sort of fallen apart. And they're basically just trying to figure out how to get through the next moment. And then there's a whole other group, which is the majority of us, where the earthquake affects us indirectly. That is, we're not actually there, we're not actually dealing with the effects of the earthquake, but it still affects us emotionally. And I'll talk about these two groups simultaneously, but they can present differently to different people. People who are directly affected are going to be people who felt the earthquake itself, who are there now. It can also include first responders, volunteers that have poured into the region to try to help. All of these people will be experiencing in a direct way the effects of the earthquake that has already occurred. The second group are anyone else in the nation that you may know somebody from the region, you may have been to this region and know of it, you may have memories of it. All of this is going to affect you indirectly. And this actually ripples out to the entire world because, of course, the world has access to, via the news, has access to what's gone on there. It will affect all of us in our own way as it sort of ripples out to the rest of the world. So there's a very direct effect, and then there's a rippling out, more indirect, and more indirect still more globally. I just want to talk a minute about the initial reaction. So for people who've gone through this, your reaction to it, what the brain is actually going to do, it's going to engage the limbic system of the brain. The brain is obviously going to see this as a threat. And it doesn't matter if you're on site, that is, you're part of the earthquake, or whether you're not, whether you're somewhere else in the world. It'll affect you differently, but the same mechanism in the brain gets tripped. And that's part of the limbic system, which is the fight or flight response, which I've talked about in other videos. When that occurs, what essentially the brain is doing is it's trying to find out how to react next. So it's trying to be able to predict into the next moment the right response. And the difficulty with critical incidents is that you typically don't have a way of coping with this because you've never seen it before. So if you're caught in it, you don't actually know the right way to react, which makes it even more difficult for the brain to be able to figure out the right response with you. As a consequence, you're going to go through a lot of acute stress responses, and they're going to come out of nowhere. It's going to seem strange, and I'll talk about that part in a second, but you're going to have different experiences for different people. Some people may have no reaction at all, and that's just the mind's way of trying to control or dominate the situation to bring the emotion under control. Other people will have different responses. So I'm going to list now some of the symptoms you're going to have, and I'll start with physical ones. You may find yourself nauseous. You may have body aches, rapid heart rate. You'll have a lot of fatigue suddenly, and you won't understand why. You won't really have done anything different. You'll just be more tired. And it's because as the brain tries to work out what to do, it burns a lot of energy trying to do this. And so fatigue is just a natural consequence. You may have headaches, body aches, difficulty breathing. These things may just happen to you as you're going through your day. And again, they're not necessarily triggered by anything specifically. They may just pop up. But this is part of the way the brain is trying to figure out how to react. Mentally, you're going to go through things as well. You'll be confused often. You may find there'll be gaps in your memory. That is, you may leave work and end up in your home and not really remember driving home, not remembering how you got there. You may be hypervigilant, and that's the brain's reaction to it just being on alert all the time. Because it's, again, the brain knows something's happened, it just doesn't know how to respond, and so it's going to put you through these different scenarios and get you to react in different ways. You may have intrusive images. So if you're a part of the aftermath of the earthquake, you may have flashbacks to those events. They may just pop into your brain, even though you could be walking down the street, they may just pop in. Your brain, when you have an intrusive image or intrusive thought, your brain reacts as though this thing is actually happening. And so the body ramps up to be able to deal with it, even though it's not actually happening. So you may all of a sudden, your heart rate will start pounding more, your breathing will increase, muscle tension will occur. All of this is because you've had a thought about something and not actually been in the event. And this is normal as the body tries to adjust. You may have difficulties concentrating. You can't concentrate for as long as you used to be able to concentrate. You may feel disoriented, not really realize where you are. There's this thing called the 1,000-mile stare, and it's kind of this, when you see people in it, it's kind of like they're looking off into space, and they're not really focused on anything. It's like they're in a trance almost. And this is, again, the body's way of dealing with trauma. What it's doing is it's kind of removing you from the emotional piece. Emotion, you may have fear, you may feel survivor's guilt, you may have nightmares, denial, that is, you may just not believe it's true, just push it away from you, not want to talk about it, not want to think about it. Feeling of depression, of anger, of agitation, frustration, grief. All of these are normal responses to this type of event. It doesn't happen for everyone, but if it's happening for you, you should know that this is your body's trying to figure out what to do inside this thing. I want to talk a little bit right now about grief itself. We're not really taught grief. Grief is something that's innate to the human species. We have a way of getting through grief, and a lot of it comes down to time. That what happens when you're overwhelmed, when you're mentally and physically overwhelmed, your body will start to immediately go into stress mode. Over time, what happens is there's a difference between the amplitude, that is the intensity of the memories of what just happened, and the distance between them. So on the front end, which is where you're at now, at the front end, you'll likely get more intense experiences, and you'll likely get them more often. They'll come in more often during the day. But with time, there's two things that should happen. The amplitude should go down, that is, they shouldn't be as intense, and then after that, they should spread out more, so you don't get as many of them. And for everybody, this is just going to be managed by the way you manage the stressful event itself. So there's lots of variables that go into understanding this, but this is the natural process to grief and loss. If you're in the earthquake zone, this obviously, because you're still living the day-to-day effects of this is going to be a longer process, right? You're trying to figure out where to live, where to get food, where to get water, all basic life skills. That stuff will postpone or delay this whole process. It will come. You will get through. The brain naturally has a way of letting go. And this is just how grief works for all people. So you're going to get there. It's just going to take longer to get there. That's all. Survivor guilt really is the feeling that because everyone else has gone through this, you didn't, and somehow you should feel bad because you didn't go through the same thing. Obviously, at a sort of cognitive level, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but the emotion is there because you're actually feeling bad for what just happened, and you're trying to figure out a way of expressing that. And in this case, it comes out in the form of guilt, but it's kind of misplaced because you shouldn't feel guilty for living. You should feel remorse for loss. Other emotional responses will be, one common one is anger, irritation, emotional outbursts. So you'll find you don't have as much patience with people as you normally do. And that that small things all of a sudden will overwhelm you. And you won't understand why that's occurring. But this is, again, part of the body's fight response. And it's just a way of pushing back at the world. It's important to recognize that not everyone came into this event at the same level. So some people were already struggling, and then the earthquake happens. And so they have limited resources to bring to bear. So for them, they may become suicidal or even homicidal as a result, because all of a sudden they can't cope anymore. They may have emotional outbursts, right, of anger. They may get into fights. There may be all sorts of these things will occur. It's because you're essentially overwhelmed and you're trying to fight back and push back and find a way through. But not everyone came into it the same level, so different people can cope better or more poorly than others. Behaviorally, some people will withdraw, other people will do the exact opposite. They'll be more active, more social, get out more, they'll want to do something. Some people will pace. Other people will sleep all the time. Some people won't be able to sleep. There are changes in social activities, changes in sleep patterns, changes in eating, antisocial behavior. That is, all of a sudden doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do. This will also come out. Increase in numbing activities. So it doesn't matter if that's drinking, drugs, gambling, anything like this. You'll tend to want to numb more. Particularly if you've done it in the past, you'll want to do this more, and you can watch the change, right? Your body's going to want to essentially not feel. So I've now listed some of the symptoms that a lot of you can probably recognize at this stage. Just remember, this is the body's normal response to an abnormal event. What you're going through is quite normal, even though it won't feel that way for you. So I want to talk to you now about things you can do to help yourself get through this period. The first thing, particularly if you're in the earthquake zone, you take care of safety needs first. Food, shelter, water, and sanitation. Four things have to happen first before the rest of this you'll be able to get to any of this other stuff. And I think right now that's probably what you're in the process of doing. So if you've survived the earthquake, you're already in the process of trying to figure out how to organize the basics. Psychologically, you have to be concerned about the grief process and to understand just what's happening with your own body and psychologically what's happening, how you're feeling. and to cut yourself some slack. That is, give yourself permission to feel this way right now. It makes perfectly good sense why you should, because you're going to have to deal with this. It's important not to make any big decisions at this moment, because the big decisions will be influenced by the trauma. Also, you will find that there will be anniversaries that will bring back emotional responses. And what I mean, it can be small things. So it could be, well, this is the 1 month after the earthquake. This is 5 months after the earthquake. Or it could be simple things that, I saw this picture on television and now I get to see it again tonight, right? These things sort of re-trigger your mind and will cause this whole flooding to occur again. What should happen over time is the amplitude, the intensity of that experience should dampen with time. So, but anniversaries have a tendency of bringing it back. It also may be that personal anniversaries, which are more intense, so if you've had other events in your life where you've experienced traumatic events, in those anniversaries may also trigger a more heightened response as a result of being already triggered by the earthquake. So a lot of this is going to be coming down to two things. Understanding first what your brain is doing, what your body needs, and then giving it what it needs. So supporting yourself. And we call that self-care, taking care of yourself. So rather than focus on work or school or all these other things, you need to take a little extra time for yourself and be more kind and gentle to yourself. So you do nurturing things that make you feel better. And you'll all have a personal list of that. You'll all know those things because you like to have them done, to do them. But now's the time to engage. So if that means, taking a bath, if that means going for a walk in a park or eating ice cream or whatever it will be to make you, to soothe yourself, now is the time to give yourself permission to do that. To just take the time to recognize you're going through something and to take care of yourself. Another important thing to do is to re-engage routine. So if you think of what's going on in your brain is searching for the right response. So the more things you can do to bring back normal routine, what the information you're providing the brain is, it's okay, we know what to do next. It's what we did yesterday, it's what we did a week ago. And so the brain just will settle down better if it has a predictable routine. So try to bring into your world a calming routine that you can perform every day so that it helps the brain organize. Now is not the time for fast food, alcohol, drugs, any of that. Now is the time for eating well. Recognize that you're burning off a lot of energy. You need good food, and you need to eat even when you don't feel like eating. You need to force yourself to eat to give your body the nutrients it needs to be able to deal with this traumatic experience. Same goes with sleep. You have to find a way to calm yourself down to try to get some sleep. Sleep, eating. See, I'm talking about basic stuff, but this is the type of stuff you're going to need to help the body get through this process. Also, exercise. Try to do calming exercise like meditation or yoga, anything like that, but also any exercise is better than no exercise. No exercise, the brain will tend to wander, but when you're physically active, your body becomes more focused on the task. And along the same lines, any activity that causes you to focus is better than activities that allow the mind to drift. So I'll just give you some examples of what people do. Some people do a puzzle, right? And they put pieces of the puzzle together because you can't do a puzzle without focusing. And so if you're feeling particularly triggered by what's going on, just try and go and do something simple. It could be as simple as washing the dishes by hand. It can be as simple as drawing or picking up an instrument. Anything that requires you to focus on what you're doing will offer a different message to the brain and will allow the fight and flight response to calm down. The other thing that's important to do is to reach out to others. You're all going through this together. Whatever you're going through, someone you know is also going through this. So now's the time to reach out to friends and do what I call a buddy system. So get somebody you know and check in with them once or twice a day to ask them how they're doing. Support them and they support you. And then talk about what you're feeling, what you're going through. Because you're going to find other people, when you start doing this, they're all going through the same thing. You're all trying to react to an event that has caused a crisis in your world. Along the same line, if you know other people are going through the same thing as you are, now's the time is to be a little more considerate of others and a little kinder to others. And you'll find that that'll get a reciprocal response, that other people will be kind to you. And this is the kind of nurturance you need at this moment to be able to look after yourself. For those directly involved in the earthquake, it's important to recognize that there may already be in existence, psychological services may already be set up. There may be some access to that or in the process of being set up. So you should also be aware that you may be able to have access to that. For everyone else, typically using your own friends, your own social network is probably a good way to get through this. If you're at a point, though, and you're not doing well, that is, you're starting to sink, right, then you need to reach out to professional services and talk to someone else professionally. Because different people react differently to this stuff. And also, anybody who's been traumatized in the past, this particular earthquake can act as a triggering event to that. So you just need to be aware of what you're going through, why you're going through it, and be aware that there are things you can do immediately to help yourself. Equally, there are professional resources out there for you to have access to. Some of you might want to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, by its definition, something that comes after traumatic stress. This typically doesn't happen to most people. It does happen to some people. You need time away from the event to see, because it's a time-based thing, to see whether you can't shake the traumatic event in your life. It's usually defined by intrusive thoughts and flashbacks, which are images. And if you're still having them, say, 6 months down the road, then you need to seek professional help. But for most of us who go through this, the natural grief process, the slow, over time, letting go, should be enough. So we had a question that came in about vicarious trauma. And unlike indirect trauma, which is trauma not experienced at the event of the earthquake, so all of us get affected by this event indirectly. Vicarious trauma is really listening to somebody else's firsthand experience of the event. And that actually happens in my profession an awful lot because, of course, what I do for a living is I listen to people's traumatic events, and then I start to wear the impact of that on me. And so vicarious trauma is I get it vicarious through the patient. So if you're talking to someone who's in the earthquake zone, who's been traumatized by it, and you're listening to it, then this could become vicarious trauma to you. That is, you will take on the weight, the emotional weight of what they just said to you. And that's a much different experience than just, being indirectly affected by the fact that so many people have died. So for those in my profession who are affected by vicarious trauma, we build into our lifestyle ways of managing the stress. So it's a lifestyle strategy for me. So I do things in order to manage the stress because I know it's going to be there. For people in this specific thing that are listening to people listening to people tell stories about the traumatic events, the best thing you can do is to have a backup system for yourself. That is, if you know you're going to hear these stories, you need to plan in advance to pass this on to someone else. So it's kind of like ripples in a pond. You take the emotional weight of what was just given to you and you kind of pass it on to someone else, and they'll pass it on to someone else. And each time it gets dampened down. And that's kind of what you do to be able to cope with this stuff in the short term. Again, I want to say my condolences to the people who have been directly and indirectly affected by this. I know this is a tough time. Try to take care of yourselves, take care of each other. That's really and do basic stuff about diet, sleep, exercise. Just be kind to yourself. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I guess people will appreciate what you explained us all about a whole trauma situation for a nation, let's say. Sevgili gençler, Türkiye'deki herkes, depremzedeler, sizlere buradan sevgilerimizi gönderiyoruz. Umarım faydalı olmuştur bu video sizler için. Yine de yapabileceğimiz bir şey varsa, cevaplayabileceğimiz bir soru varsa John ile beraber bunu yapmaktan memnuniyet duyarız. Bu videoları sizler için bazıları İsviçre'den çekiyoruz. Bakınız gönlümüz hala sizlerde. Uzakta olmak pek bir şey ifade etmiyor. Bizim gönlümüz sizlerle beraber atıyor. Ne diyeyim? Pek pozitif bir şey söyleyemeyeceğim ama John her şeyi söyledi. Bir sonraki videoda görüşmek üzere diyorum sevgili gençler. Hoşçakalın.